This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. Please remain calm.
Welcome to the How to Survive the Narcissist Apocalypse podcast. I am Chad the Impaler, and thanks for showing up this episode. In this episode, we have a narcissist abuse survivor interview with Paige. And before we get to Paige, let me just say another trigger warning on this episode. We're going to just do trigger warnings as a whole going forward. This episode might trigger you. It might not trigger you. If it does trigger you, turn it off. If it doesn't trigger you, keep on listening. And also, when we use the term narcissist on the show, it is a blanket of people that exhibit narcissistic tendencies. They might not have specifically narcissistic personality disorder, but they could have borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, all of the cluster B personality disorders that are that meet the diagnostic criterion. Some of these people that we're talking about, or all of them, most of them probably will not have an actual diagnosis. This is the opinion of the people who are telling the stories. And now that is out of the way, things that happened this week, I've been trying to change the theme music of the show. And so far, it's been a struggle. I've gone through many different types of songs that I wanted to use, and I'm still stuck on the old theme song. I think I've outgrown the old theme song, because when we started this podcast, it was kind of a jokey podcast, and now we're like a serious podcast. And, you know, we talk to people all over the world, and everyone tells their story, and we learn, and we share, and we grow. And it's a lot different than, you know, just a happenstance that this happened. So I don't know if everyone agrees that I should change the music. I've been trying to find the right one. Not everyone's going to be happy with whatever I choose. I'm not even happy sometimes. I thought I picked out the right one, and then I come back to it. I'm like, nah, this stinks. So I'm still working on that. I'm still working on getting everyone's episode out. We're trying a new schedule as well. We're going to do right now once a week to see how that goes, instead of doing twice a week, because sometimes it's just too much for people to listen to and they miss episodes. So that is one part. Another thing that's going on, I told myself never go back into support groups on Facebook, because I'm not the biggest fan. Yes, there are good people on there, and yes, those people are helpful, but sometimes you run into some people who are projecting their own issues onto you, and I find it triggering and not helpful. But for some people it works. For me, it doesn't. But anyway, I went back on this week onto a male-only narcissistic abuse survivor group. And boy, what I saw was terrible. So if you are, it was very misogynistic. It was a lot of woman hating, and it just didn't seem helpful for anyone. There was a lot of projection. I got into a couple arguments where I just said to some of the not the original posters, but the people responding to the original posters, where I just said, like, please stop projecting your issues onto this person. This person has stated X, and you're just saying Y, and you're telling them to do Y, and they don't want to do Y. Stop doing what you're doing. And a lot of the memes on there, it was really disgusting behavior. The person who was in charge of the board tried his best to have people stop that behavior, but then at the same time, he was questionable, some of the things he would post and say as well. So if you are a male, and you are just entering the healing process, maybe you've just had this happen with a relationship, or you were raised by a narcissist, and you go onto these forums, please do not go into a male-only forum. Please go into a female and male combined co-ed forum. At least you're going to get a better quality person out there who might have your best interest at heart. What I saw today, or in this past week, was really disgusting. So men out there, stay away from those male-only groups. It's not the right place for you to get any sort of healing. It may feel great to be angry, and some reason you're angry only at all women in general, but it's, one person did whatever they did to you, and not everyone. So please, let's try and keep a rational mind here. Now, after all of that, I did an interview with Paige, and Paige's story is an interesting one. She was raised by a narcissistic mother, and she has not had the easiest life. And she's, well, I'll let you get into it. But she's got a sweet voice, and her story is one of overcoming being raised by a narcissistic parent, really on her own and without a lot of help. So she's a lot to be proud of because she's soldiered her way through maneuvering through this all by herself, and that's not an easy thing to do. So now, without further ado, here is my interview with Paige. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. With me on the line, I have Paige. How are you, Paige?
I'm good, thank you.
So I just want to thank you for being on the show today. And you are a narcissist abuse survivor raised by a narcissist, specifically a narcissistic mother. And I'm now just going to get out of your way, and the floor is yours.
Okay. So my mom's a narcissist. I would classify her as a covert narcissist. And I only have I realized this over the past year now. I've always known that there's been something wrong, but never been able to quite classify it. So it feels good to finally that there's a name for it, and that there's a specific, spectrum that she's on, and all of it can kind of make sense. So I'm the youngest out of, I have an older sister, and I have two older half brothers, on my dad's side. But I was raised in a single parent home with my mom, my older sister. And so when I came into the picture, things were quite already really messy between my parents. My mom came out of on my mom's family side. They were quite religious. So when she got together with my dad, she kind of left that religious community and kind of got excommunicated from it because she got together with my dad. Mm-hmm. And she had my mom. My mom had my sister, and then she had me later. But when I came into the picture, my mom and dad my mom had a restraining order against my dad at that point, and my dad wasn't there when I was born. He was there for my sister, but he wasn't there when I was born. So when I kind of started growing up and realizing what the whole situation was of my life, the dynamics of it, it was quite turmoilish, because my mom had very much the consensus of what our situation was, that she was very much scared of him, that he was very emotionally abusive, physically abusive towards her. I had never seen my dad be physically abusive, but that's what she said, that he was physically abusive. I do believe that he's emotionally abusive, and I would classify him as a grandiose narcissist, because now looking back, and I can compare my mom and my dad's behaviors, and they're just all too similar, except my mom's only got that, the difference between covert and grandiose. My dad is just totally lines up with the grandiose, and my mom totally lines up with the covert, but they're both completely similar in their behaviors of narcissism. So me and my sister had to go have visits with my dad because that was kind of my mom had custody of us, but we had to go visit with my dad on occasions. But my mom didn't make it easier on us when it came to the fear and the nervousness of having to go see him, because she made herself very much like she was a victim of the situation that she had gotten into with my dad. And the story that she kind of told was, she left out a lot of like the responsibility on her part for getting herself into it. And the choices, it was kind of like she made it sound like she had been, like it just wasn't her fault. Like she had just been manipulated into it. So she didn't make it easier on me and my sister to kind of go have visits with him, because it was just, she was scared of him. And so as little kids, at least, I don't know, I feel like my sister too felt this way for sure. As little kids looking at the adult and being like, well, my mom as an adult is scared of this man. Like, how much more as little children do we need to be scared? Mm-hmm. So, it just, but being around my dad, actually going to go visit him, there wasn't all that much reason to be scared of him. I feel like my dad was more absent than anything when we were with him. So anyway, growing up with that was difficult, going through those visits and the dealing with my mom, dealing with my dad on, over the phone, setting up stuff for us to go visit him. That was complicated. But I think growing up, aside from that, we had a lot of family. My mom wasn't excommunicated from the church anymore. She was involved with my mom's side of the family, and my mom's side of the family is quite large. Mm-hmm. And the community in the church and stuff like that was quite extensive too. So we hung out with a lot of people, like my mom's side of the family and friends and all that stuff. So me and my sister have talked about it, and we've kind of agreed that we both had a generally, I don't want to say happy childhood. Maybe that's the wrong word, but I feel like we were small enough and maybe ignorant enough to not notice the problem on my mom's side of things, like my mom's behavior towards us. And I think it was less then, and it was easier for my mom to just act like she was, she had been abused, so how could she be the abuser, kind of thing. And we were the products of the situation that she had gotten into. But looking back, I remember we had so much social, opportunities and hanging out with people. So it was kind of like being able to forget what was happening in our life and, just focus on being children and all that stuff. But I do remember looking back the signs of it as a small child growing up into being like, 8, 9, 10, up until that point, feeling so much like I used to think as a little girl, wishing that I wasn't born, because then my mom could have the life that she deserved, that she missed out on, because that was so much the impression that I had been given, that we were products of this huge mistake that she had made and this huge turmoil life event she had been.
Did she verbalize that, or was it just insinuated through comments?
It was insinuated. She never actually verbally said you guys were a mistake, but it was just in so many ways, it was just so close to saying that. And your sister also was able to, you got verification or validation from your sister that you weren't alone in that thought process. Yeah. But it's funny because only now me and my sister talk to each other and we have a pretty good relationship, but only now as adults, my sister's married now, as adults, we are able to talk about it. Throughout our growing up together, we never talked about what was going on at home with each other. It was just kind of like, even though we shared a room for basically the entire time that we were at home living with Mom, we shared a room, but we never talked about this stuff with each other.
So how is your relationship?
Because again, it was.
Oh, sorry. Oh, how was your relationship growing up with her at the time, and how is it now?
At the time, it was good, but it was me and my sister were complete opposites, like night and day in how we dealt with things and in physicality, like just everything that you could think of under the sun when it comes to comparing people. We were just the opposites. So there wasn't a lot to relate to each other in that way, but we had a good relationship. It was kind of like my sister was my protector because my mom had kind of put a duty on her as the older child to protect my mom from my dad, even though she was a very small little girl.
So your sister was the parent to the parent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically. And also my mom had emotional incest with my sister too. Kind of put that spousal responsibilities on my sister of like protecting and giving her the communication that she needs. Being that responsible person towards her.
Did your sister, not that I want you to talk for your sister, but did your sister resent you for things that weren't even your responsibility, in a sense, that she had to take on these roles in any sort of way?
No.
Okay.
No, never. She just kind of, I think she saw me as like this little person, like a little puppy almost, that she needed to protect from something bigger and scarier, kind of thing. Like that's always how I felt like she saw me. She just kind of saw me as somebody that needed to be protected from my dad, not from my mom, but from my dad. Because my sister, and I don't blame her for this at all, but because my mom put this on her, my sister always felt like she had an obligation towards my mom in everything. So that would mean when there was a problem with me, my sister would automatically side with my mom and kind of take on that disciplinary role too. And even though my sister didn't really have a place in, the dynamics between me and my mom in the moment, I would say that to her. I'd be like, why is my sister a part of this? It kind of doesn't really have anything to do with her. And she'd be like, well, I need her here to help me. I need her here to, kind of just saying reasons like as if my sister was another parent, to reinforce whatever she was saying or her discipline kind of thing. So my sister kind of always felt like she had an obligation and she needed to be loyal to my mother first and foremost over anything else. So that kind of like, not that I ever resented my sister for that, but it kind of furthered, like put us further apart in us being able to have a relationship with each other. And in that way, my mom very much so alienated me and my sister from one another, and kind of in so many ways pitting one another against each other. Unfortunately.
So your sister,
but now
your sister was the reliable one, I guess, or would be the golden child of sorts.
Yeah. I mean, there was a period. It was so hard to pinpoint because my mom was alternately the hovering mother, but also the ignoring mother, the neglectful. So she kind of alternated between those two, and she also alternated between through a long period of me being the golden child and my sister being the scapegoat.
The hovering part, and then going back. I guess in my experience, and it's not everyone's experience, I put it in the words of they're there when it's convenient for them, and they're not there because it's not convenient for them to be there at that time. Was that your experience or no?
In so many ways, yeah, like in different instances, yeah, that's my experience. But I think my mom, towards the end of, things coming to a head, I lived at home till I was 21. And my sister lived at home till she was 25. And my sister admitted to me that if she hadn't gotten married, she would have stayed at home with my mom. And that should say everything about how much control my mom had over my sister and had over me to a certain point. So when we lived, when I was younger, throughout my childhood, we lived in this small town till I was 10 years old. And this was in the same town as my father. We lived in this small town until I was 10 years old. And my mom decided that we were going to move south to a bigger town, where my aunt and uncle lived. And it was quite far away. It was like 13 hours away. So we moved there. And that's when things started to get bad, after we moved. And I was 10 years old and my sister was 12. So my sister was only 2 years older than me. So the first year I finished grade 4 before we moved. And then when we moved, I started grade 5. And I finished grade 5, but grade 5 was kind of like when the signs of things kind of started to get worse. And then as soon as middle school started for me in grade 6, that's when things just went full pelt, like completely. And like, it was so bad, it started to manifest itself in me inwardly and outwardly. So, and I think during that time, I think up till the point of me ending middle school, that's when I became the scapegoat and my sister became the golden child, more predominantly in situations. But through middle school was horrible. I had a nice time in elementary school. I had a lot of friends. But being from my mom's religion and all that stuff, it was discouraged that I make friends at school, because they weren't of the same religion. And there was a bit more leniency with that when I was in elementary school. I had friends at school. I wasn't allowed to hang out with them after school, but I did have a social life. But that all changed after we moved, and especially in middle school. And so I didn't really have a whole lot of friends in middle school, and there was a lot of things that spoke to the neglect. My mom was a very beautiful person, beautiful on the outside. And if I could liken her to anybody, it would sound funny, but it would be Wonder Woman, because she looked exactly like Wonder Woman. She's like the dark hair, the blue eyes. She was a gorgeous person. So when my mom would come visit me at middle school to drop off something or whatever, there would be all the popular kids, all the popular girls and like guys in middle school and stuff like that I desperately wanted to be acknowledged by and be friends with, like the large majority of kids in my class and stuff like that would only come up to me after they saw my mom, because they'd see my mom come by and, she'd give me something or say hello and then she'd leave. And they would come up to me after she, left or whatever, and be like, "That's your mom?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And they're like, "She's so beautiful." And they'd say all these things about her. And that was like the only way that I was acknowledged by them. But it was like she was the epitome of like these popular girls wanted to grow up to be and all this stuff. And that didn't last very long because they were only interested in my mom because she was so beautiful. And of course I was this weird, like, teenager who like wore the same pair of pants throughout the entire duration of middle school. And like, really, like, they were bad pair of jeans. Like, they didn't fit me well. And my sister was the same. Like, it's kind of a superficial subject of the type of clothes that we wore, but it plays into it because we never got like new clothes or anything, or clothes that fit us properly. My mom always made sure that she was very well dressed and, you know, groomed very nicely and everything. But me and my sister were kind of like, you know, if people would look at us, if my mom would introduce us to, you know, her work partners or whatever, you know, it would kind of be like, well, where did these kids come from? Like, it would kind of like be that. So it would be embarrassing I remember feeling embarrassed because there was just no likening to me to her or my sister to her, because we were just like kind of these, like, it sounds a little harsh, but kind of like these slummy teenagers, you know, kind of thing. Not that we wanted to be like that, but that's just the way it was. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the neglect. And when we did try to wear things that did look good or was form-fitting or like anything to do with expressing our individuality or, you know, wanting to be girly or anything like that, it was stomped on pretty quickly. And I didn't understand why at all. But I just kind of went with it. But me and my sister had different ways of dealing with this abuse that we didn't really realize was happening. My sister was a very social person. She had lots of friends. She still made friends in school, even though my mom tried to shame her just for being social, being a social person. Because after we moved, my mom started to isolate herself more. And my sister dealt with it in the way that she still tried to be friends, but I dealt with it the opposite way, where I went inward. And I knew that there was something wrong, but I couldn't put a pin in it. I couldn't put words to it. And so I just, as time went on through middle school, it just dealt with it more inwardly, more and more inside, to the point that I kind of developed a dissociative disorder, just to deal with my reality, to just disassociate from reality, because I didn't know how to deal with it any other way. Like, school was so bad, I would go and eat lunch in the bathroom, or I'd spend my entire lunch in the bathroom because I didn't have any friends and I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin. And there was no elements to help me get over that. You know, there wasn't like, you know, that encouragement or that me even being able to talk about it with my mom, because it was just kind of like, my problems don't matter. Only her problems matter. And my feelings weren't real to her.
And at this point, you have no one in your life that you can trust.
No one.
Not even your sister at this point, because you just are so far apart, and you're pitted against each other.
So far apart. Yeah, just because we were such opposites, and my sister couldn't relate to me and I couldn't relate to her. And that's not either of our faults. That's just kind of how it was. And it was just that, like, possibility of us being able to help each other was just kind of the last, you know.
Well, at that point,
at
that point in your life, you have no idea really what's going on because you have no experience of this situation. And, you know, when I would go over to other friends' homes, I'd be like, my home is a little bit different than this. And, you know, I had friends to be around to tell me, or at least validate that, like, things aren't normal. And your sister might have had that. I have no idea, because she had some friends, but you had none of that. So, and you have no one to talk to. So that's very difficult. Not knowing if what you're dealing with is normal or not normal, I would assume. Did you think you were going crazy?
It did. I did think, I thought that there was something. I never blamed my mom for a long time. I always blamed myself. Even though I knew there was something wrong with her and that she had the control over what was going on with me, I still blamed myself because I thought, well, this must just be me. Like, this is just how I deal with life. Like, I can't hack it. I can't hack life, obviously. And looking back, I'm just like, this was because of the abuse. Like, this was just, it wasn't me. This had nothing to do with who I was as a person or my ability to deal with life. It was just survival, surviving the moment, surviving from day to day. And that's what life turned into throughout middle school and through high school, was just existing. My mom's mental illness mentality started to deteriorate even more with her narcissism. And it just became like we had to live life with her. Like, however she was living her life, we had to do it the exact same way. So she just decided to completely isolate herself from the world. She was still going to church and stuff like that, but she wasn't socializing with anybody at church, anything like that. And so she would shut herself in the house. She wouldn't, we couldn't go out and do things. It's like pulling teeth for me and my sister to want to go out and associate with people, even in the church community, like kids who were because we were only allowed to hang out with kids who were also in church, not kids who were, in school or anything like that, which added a very difficult dynamic to my life, but that's another story. But it was so hard. And my sister tried even harder than I did to have people over even. And when my sister did try to have people over, my mom would go into rages against her for bringing people over, because my mom wouldn't want people in the house. She wouldn't want people to see the house. She wouldn't want to have to talk to people. She made my sister feel like she was a horrible person for wanting, or betraying her for wanting people to come over. My mom would people would come knock on the door to come visit us, and my mom would just not let us answer the door, and my mom would shut the blinds. And so we were forced to live this with her. We were teenagers, we were growing, and we weren't allowed to be individuals. We weren't allowed to socialize. We weren't allowed to, we did manage to get, some hanging out with people, but it took a lot of work. It wasn't without a painstaking process to get there.
Yeah, you were trapped in her prison that she was creating.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
So after high school, sorry, continue.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, after high school, you left home at 21. What happened after the fact when you were out of the house for the first time, away from everything? Was there a sense of relief? And what were your relationships with people like after? And that's pretty much my question.
Well, that's a story in itself. I didn't leave. I was kicked out.
Okay.
When I was 21. So the leading up to that, I'm sorry. Do you want me to I can go past.
Oh no,
no.
Tell your story in whatever way. I was just curious.
Okay. Yeah. So leading up to that point, I was, what had happened was, it was the year of 2013. I think November of 2013 is when, between November of 2013 and June of 2014 was the period where everything was leading to a head, to coming to, an end. unbeknownst to me. That's when the kicking out started, her kicking me out of the house and locking the door. So through the winter months, sometimes I would leave on my own just to get away from her, and I would go sit outside in the dead of winter for like a half an hour just to let her cool down from whatever rage that she was in, and for me to kind of get some solace away from her, and then I would come back inside. But I spent most of my time in the bathroom or in my room. I would go to work and I would come home and I'd go straight to the bathroom, or I'd go straight to my room and I'd stay in there until the evening was over, just to avoid her, just to avoid getting into any sort of fight, because it would be over anything. Like, it was just, a fight would happen over dishes or anything. She would try to find something to get into a fight with me over, and it would be full blown, like sufficient crying and hyperventilating over, you know, the smallest things. So I would do anything to avoid it. And there was one point where she did kick me out. I was wandering the streets a lot when she kicked me out. There was points where I would just leave the house and go wander the streets because I just didn't, I needed to escape, but I had nowhere to go. And I would end up at like a coffee shop, and I would sit in there before it closed, and my sister would come find me and tell me to come back home. And, you know, by my mom would send her to go find me. And I would just be so fearful of going back home, but I had nowhere else to go. And there was one specific night where she did kick me out, and this was December, January, and she locked the door, and it was at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. No, it was much later than that. It was like midnight, something like that. And so my grandma lived not too far, within a reasonable walking distance from us. And I had nowhere to go. It's the middle of the night, middle of winter. So I walked all the way to my grandma's, and my grandma lived kind of like out in the country a little bit. So I had to walk all the way to her place. And I remember, like, as I was walking to her place, I hearing like coyotes and stuff like that. So it was a bit freaky. And I went to her place, and I knocked on her door when I got there and managed to wake her up, and I had a place to stay the night. And then the next day I walked back home. And then the last time she kicked me out for good, it was over a lid to a piece of Tupperware. She had asked me where the Tupperware was to this lid, and she showed it to me. And I didn't say anything, and I turned around and I went and walked to my room because I left the piece of Tupperware in my room. And as soon as I turned around, she went into this full-on rage against me. And I didn't know what I did wrong. I didn't know. And what she said the reason was for her getting into this anger against me was that I was being disrespectful to her because I turned around and I walked away from her. And I tried to explain to her, well, I was turning around to go get the piece of Tupperware that you were wanting to go, to put together from the lid. And it was over something so silly, and she just, there was no reasoning with her. And I apologized. And there was a point that had reached that when I apologized, I might as well have been telling my mother to F off or whatever. Like, saying sorry just made her angrier. And there was no reasoning with her. And so she chased me into my room, and I tried to get away from her. She managed to push her way into the room, and she yelled and told me to get my things. Oh no, she told me to give her the house key that I had. And I didn't want to give it to her because I knew what that meant. But she managed to get it. She managed to convince me to give it to her. So I gave it to her, and She didn't let me get any of my things. I didn't have a car, but thankfully, I didn't have a car for a long time. But thankfully, like a few months before she kicked me out for good, I had bought a car, so I had something to go with. But she didn't let me grab any of my things. She kicked me out. She locked the door, and that was for good. My sister couldn't do anything. And I remember my sister just looking at me, like, I remember looking at her, like, help me. And she just looked at me like she couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. Like, she kind of, still sided with Mom, like I was kind of doing it to myself. And so I left. I got in my car, and I was, like, hyperventilating, crying, not being able to completely wrap my brain around what just happened. Even though I had been going through this, there had been a leading up to this. I had been kicked out before, but I could always come back. Not that I wanted to, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. So I called my aunt and uncle, and I said to them, like, through hyperventilating tears, this is what's happening. Like, please talk to her. Please, like, help me. I don't have anywhere else to go right now. And I called my aunt and uncle, who lived very, very far away from us. So there was really nothing that they could do other than call her. So they called my other uncle, who lived in the same town as us. I guess, I don't know if he called my mom. I think he did. I don't know what the conversation was, but I ended up leaving the house. And I went to a hotel parking lot, and I ended up sleeping in my car for, I think, a week, until my uncle came and found me, and said, hey, like, you can't be living in your car. And I was like, well, I don't really have anywhere else to go. This isn't by choice. And it wasn't like, I had people at work that I was friends with, and my family, I didn't really feel like helped me at all. My uncle came and found me, but it felt like more like we need to take care of this situation so that we can save face with people who know us, mm-hmm. and the community of the church and all that stuff. It wasn't so much like, you need help. Like, it was just kind of like, we need to fix this, kind of thing. And so my uncle managed to convince my grandma to stay with her, because my mom had gotten to my grandma before I did. Mm-hmm. Because I went to talk to my grandma and tell her, like, this is happening. And my grandma just kind of took sides with my mom and said that I was being disrespectful and I needed to, in a kind way. My grandma isn't a mean person, but she's very much... her children can do no wrong, mm-hmm. kind of thing. And so I just left my grandma's, and I was just like, I can't reason with you either. Like, you're not listening to me. So my Uncle Kurt, after that had happened, my Uncle Kurt convinced my grandma to let me stay with her, and I ended up staying with my grandma for a month. And then, I took my last check from work. I took everything that I had from my last check, and I took the first, like, crappy job that I could find in the next town that was, like, 45 minutes away, and I rented, like, a small studio, and I packed my car full of all the stuff that I had, and I left town, and I moved away.
Mm-hmm. How did that feel?
And I told my grandma. I don't know. It was an odd feeling. It felt sad. It felt sad and confusing, but also in a small way liberating, because I was finally getting away from everything. But the way it all happened was not how I had pictured. I mean, I don't know what I expected, but it was not the way anybody should have to, leave home.
So how many years ago was that?
6 years.
6 years
5
ago?
years.
Okay.
Yeah, give or take.
So did they try to suck you back into the family at that point once you went away?
No.
No.
I very much got the feeling like my family didn't care. Like, I only lived 45 minutes away,
Mm-hmm.
and I came back into town to visit my grandma and my sister and stuff like that. And my mom, surprisingly. I would visit my mom, but not for a long time, not for at least a period of time. But I kind of came back into the picture with my mom when my sister started dating, because that's kind of when everything fell apart between my mom and my sister. My sister got a boy in her life, and my mom didn't like that. And there was a fallout between the two of them. So my mom brought me, was nice to me and kind of brought me back into her life.
Did you realize what was going on at the time?
Ally.
Yeah, did you realize at the time what she was doing? Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did, but I didn't want to, I needed my mom. I was willing to just take the fault for everything.
Mm-hmm.
and just so I could have my mom, because I felt so alone.
So that gave you the like a love you needed to feel?
Yeah, I still did not. No, it didn't.
Okay.
But I was like the pining for it, the possibility of it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was being nice to me because she needed an ally against my sister. And I was the only one she could talk bad about my sister to.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I didn't really accept her bad talk about my sister, it was kind of me trying to mediate and being like, trying to convince her to deal with things in a proper way with my sister and kind of bring her back to reality. And being like, well, and my mom was super nice to me, because she didn't want to lose me with that ally. It wasn't because she wanted me back in her life. It was because she needed an ally against my sister and this big wedding that was happening. That's kind of when I came back. My sister kind of, I had a relationship with my sister is when she started dating, and I don't know if it was because my sister needed an ally against my mom, but the timing's there, like I didn't feel any interest from them after all that had happened until this event in both of their lives started to happen. And I didn't really get any communication. Like, nobody came to visit me, really. And so I felt like really, really rejected by and my mom's side of the family is quite extensive. And throughout the time that we lived in this bigger town, most of my mom's family moved from the smaller town to where we were living. So we were kind of like most of the family was in the same town. So I felt like nobody really cared, nobody really was interested in me and this, horrible thing that had happened. Mm-hmm. And nobody asked me, what happened. It was kind of like they all had listened to what my mom was saying about me. And they kind of just decided that that's the way it was. Nobody asked me, what's your perspective on this,
Did you try to tell your side of the story, or did you just know that there was no point?
I just knew there was no point, and I didn't trust my family. I didn't trust them either.
Yeah, because they would probably go right back to your mom.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think so. Just all the signs were just pointing in that direction, that they just honestly didn't care to ask me what my side of it was or what really happened. That I wasn't a problem child, and that I had put my mother through so much,
So what happened for you to finally go no contact with your mom?
It wasn't until one of my relationships boys, being in relationships with boys was what brought me out of the control that my mom had.
Mm-hmm.
My first relationship is what I got in my first relationship right before I got kicked out. So that's kind of the reason why I got kicked out. That wasn't the surface level reason, but really the core of it was. And I hid that relationship from my mother because I knew she would take it away from me. So I kept it a secret as much as I could. But I obviously didn't do a very good job. She figured it out. But she kind of knew that I was done. I realized her for what she was, and I was done kind of dealing with it. As much as I was trying my best to survive it, without creating conflict. So it wasn't until one of my relationships that I relayed my story to. And I relayed my story to all the guys in my life, and 99% of them said, she's insane. That's horrible. They all validated what I went through, but it wasn't me being crazy. But it wasn't until one of my relationships that he said, that sounds like narcissism. And I was like, what? Like, I had never heard that term, like, because we use that term kind of colloquially, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, kind of, so I didn't know that was kind of a classified mental illness,
mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. I thought it was just kind of like an ego problem that some people had. But I looked into it, and he kind of relayed to me kind of more what he knew about it and confirmed for me that it was this. And he introduced me to like Reddit,
mm-hmm.
the Reddit group Raised by Narcissists. And I looked into that, and I did more reading, and that's where it all kind of snowballed and like it started to become more solidified in my mind that this is what it was. And I started doing more research, and he kind of presented the idea of maybe you shouldn't talk to her anymore. Maybe you need to cut her out of your life, because she was still wreaking havoc in my life, even after all this time, even though I had moved to even farther away than I was where I was living. I now live 4 hours away from where the town that I grew up in. And I just couldn't quite wrap my brain around that idea quite yet at the time. But the more reading that I did, and the more things that I learned, and like podcasts that I listened to and all this stuff, I just finally came to the conclusion that I need to cut her out of my life, because I still had conversations with her sometimes on the phone, and it would end with me getting off the phone, and it would just ruin my day, or it would ruin my week, and I would be in a dark place for like an entire week till I could, get back up on the horse and move on and be okay and pull myself out of it, but she would, even over the phone, she could put me back in that sick place. So I finally decided that I don't want to talk to you anymore. And she had no consequences either for what she had done. Mm-hmm. I had given her no consequences for what she had done. And she wanted to act like nothing had happened. She didn't. And I tried to talk to her about it and being like, hey, this has been a long-standing issue that we haven't really talked about. And this is a problem, and I needed her to just listen. And I didn't even get through the first few sentences of relaying that day that she had kicked me out for good. And she just instantly started gaslighting me and saying, that's not what happened. And she told me that she wanted me to come home, and I chose to leave. And started trying to make me question what had happened. And so when she started doing that, I just cut the conversation short, and I was just like, you know what? No, there's no more of this. I can't even, she didn't want to talk about it. And even when I said, Mom, do you know where I went when she kicked me out? Do you know where I went? And she said, I don't want to know. because it hurts me too much. And I said, well, it happened to me. It didn't happen to you. It happened to me, and it hurt you too much to know where I went. And I asked my sister, I said, did she talk about me after I left? Like, after she made me leave, like, did she say anything, like, good or bad? You know, did she say anything? And she said, no. Like, no, she didn't talk about you. It was like you never existed. And as much as that hurt, I totally believed it. I totally believed it, because that was just the vibe and the outward energy and that I was getting from her, was that she didn't care. And it was like, I never existed. She didn't care where I went or what happened. You know, like I could have gotten like murdered or like robbed. Anything could have happened when you're sleeping on the street and you're sleeping in your car. But she didn't care, and she didn't want to know, because it hurt her too much to even talk about it. So that's when I just kind of blocked her number and I stopped talking to her.
How long ago was that?
That was, I think, 2 years ago or a year ago that I had that conversation with her. Not too sure. I think a year ago.
And since then, have you been going to any sort of therapy, or how have you been coping?
Mostly I coped through my relationships, being able to talk about it through them. And that's what part of the reason why it made my relationship so unhealthy, because I was carrying all that baggage, and I put everything that I had lost into those relationships with guys. That love that I didn't get from my mother, and that acceptance and that understanding and the validation, just everything. And, you know, I never had I just never had that love, not from my dad, not from my mom. And, you know, not having very many friends in my life to give me that validation either. My life was very isolated. And because that's what I found, where I found the most acceptance, I kind of made that my entire world, was just that relationship. Because I was able to be comfortable with myself in it and get that love and acceptance.
How did that go?
Each relationship has its own ending.
But you learned.
But I learned, yes, I learned. And the beginning of like the more of the first couple or few relationships were very immature, like incredibly immature, because in my mind, I always viewed myself as like a few years behind in my maturity. Like I thought for what it was, like I would be like 21, but I'd actually be like 19 in my brain, you know, because I didn't have those experiences to bring me there, to bring me to my age. So it was like just now, after I got kicked out, was I able to actually live my life and figure stuff out and make stupid decisions and grow emotionally in my maturity. So yeah, I mean, a lot of them ended very poorly, but they were also very immature themselves.
But it sounds like you learned from all of everything that happened, that you were able to examine exactly what how you acted or reacted, and you were able to build from there.
Yeah. I mean, I've been frustrated with myself because of looking back, and I beat myself up sometimes because of how long it's taken me to get to certain points. Well, how old are you now? But that's just me. Like, I'm harsh on myself. I'm 26 now.
Yeah,
I just turned 26.
You're only 26. I remember I went and I did this program about, I'm going to say 8 years ago. maybe 6 or 7 years ago, 6, 7 or 8 years ago. And I was like 35 or 36 at the time. And I was the youngest person in this program, and I was telling them all these things like had gone on and what I was learning. And everyone at that program was like, "Oh, I wish I was like you at your age doing these things, and I wish I had the knowledge that you're getting right now of how you've been in life." And so that happened to me, and I was 35 or 36. So I'm saying to you that you're 26, that you know you're in a real good. I know all these terrible things happen, but the fact that you're dealing with it at the age of 26, and which is good. You know, you have a long life ahead of you, and now you're unpacking these things at a young age, and learning how to deal with them is. I mean, try not to think that you're old or beat yourself up about it, because in the grand scheme of things, you're young, and a lot of people never deal with these things. A lot of people, when they do deal with them, it's very late in life, and they've missed out on a lot of things. So I guess, you know, the one thing I want you to remember is that you're working on it. It's a work in progress. There'll be 2 steps forward, 5 steps back and everything, but so far in your life, it sounds like you've always picked yourself up, dust yourself off, and gotten through to the next step. If you've had very difficult times, but you do it, and you're learning, and you've done it all yourself. And that is something that not a lot of people can do, and you've done it. So 26, you should be proud of yourself. And I know it's easier to say don't kick yourself or anything like that, because I know people tell me that all the time, and it's impossible sometimes to stop yourself from doing it. But just remember, you've come a long way in a very short amount of time. You've done, and you're aware of what's going on, and you know what you have to do in your mind, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's just I think I've always have been, and still working on trying to not be so hard on myself. But I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. That does mean a lot.
So are you, like as far as seeing like a professional to work out some other things that you might not want to work out, or have you gone that route, or is it too expensive or things like that to do for you right now?
Well, yeah, I think money's always kind of been a little bit of a, I don't want to say a problem, but I just never always found the money to do therapy. So sometimes it would be too expensive. I did go to therapy for a little while, but I do need to keep going, because it's kind of the only thing that I think is really going to help me, as much as everything has its place, as much as the research and learning so much about what narcissistic personality disorder is and how it manifests itself in its victims, and the behavior and everything. As much as that helps, I think therapy does have a large place in healing. So I think that's something that I'm definitely always on my mind to pursue.
As far as your healing has gone, in your mind, what kind of things do you think need to be healed still? You have the understanding that you need healing still, but you're still getting triggered by a lot of things?
Yeah. Well, I kind of triggered totally. That's a great word. Because my mom still tries. I mean, even this was not like a week ago, not even a week ago, my mom still tried to text me. I had kind of left the religious community that my mom had raised us in, because I couldn't separate the two. You know, like, I have my own issues with it, but my mom kind of, there was a bind, you know, like it was too melded together. The growing up in this specific religion and my mom's emotional abuse, my mom's abuse. It was just two together. So I haven't quite separated either. And I'm still getting triggered by, you know, my grandma tries to stay in contact with me, and my grandma is very much involved with my mom. So my grandma's a very nice person, but she's also very ignorant, and she's very neutral, irritatingly neutral when it comes to problems that are obvious between me and my mom. Mm-hmm. And she tells me to, like, you know, call your mother, and, you know, she'd love to hear from you, and she, you know, she deserves a boost, and she could use a call from you, and, you know, it would do her heart so much good. And I hold myself back because there's no point in me saying to her, like, I don't want to talk to mom. Like, there's just no reasoning with my grandma. And
well, the thing I would want to say, the thing I would want to say for you is, what about me? Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
the whole thing is like, your mom this, your mom that. What, like, really, I'm the child. What about me? And, you know,
but the thing is, sorry.
Oh, no, continue.
Well, the thing is, my mom is involved, my grandma, in almost in a lot of things, but towards the end, she involved my grandma in the issues when I was living at home. And there was one point where she involved my grandma. My mom had said she had seen a demon at night when she was sleeping. And this was so ludicrous to me that this was even coming up. But I came home from work, and my grandma was standing in the living room, and so was my mom. And my grandma asked me to sit down, and my grandma was like, this vibe of my grandma was going to be the mediator, but I didn't know what was going on. And my grandma told me when my mom had said that she had seen a demon at night. And my grandma, in so many words, insinuated that I was the reason my mom saw a demon, that I was reading literature or like something. I was doing something wrong. And it was just so insane to me. Like, absolutely, like, this was a madhouse that this was even coming up. But that's how ignorant my grandma is to my mom's behavior, and letting my mom actually blame me for that type of stuff. That is just so insane. And that's why I just don't feel like there's any point in, and I feel like I'm trying to get to a point where I'm thinking about cutting off contact with my grandma, because
she's just like a flying monkey for her.
She is.
Yeah.
She is totally. She's a flying monkey, and there's nothing I can do to help her see my side of things. And she pities me, and it's like she thinks, from my mom making her think that I'm a broken person and that there's something wrong with me. And it's like every time I talk to her on the phone, I have to convince her otherwise. You know, that I'm happy, that I'm good, like things are going on good in my personal life, you know, for me, aside from my past and all that, like things are good, like I'm okay. And it's like I have to convince her every time, you know.
And how's your relationship with your sister now?
It's good. Like, both of us are using each other. Like, we're talking. We live. She still lives in the same town that we grew up in. And she's married now, but we talk on the phone, you know, every so often. And
but your sister still your sister still talks to your mom?
No.
Oh, okay, she doesn't. Okay.
I introduced narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder to my sister. My sister didn't have any idea what it was, and when I figured out everything, I introduced it to her, and my sister was having a lot of problems. My mom sabotaged her wedding. Like, that's a whole story in itself too. But that's really where they both went opposite directions, and my mom kind of went to war against my sister in a way. And my sister was still having problems with my mom because my mom was still wanting to act like nothing had happened with my sister. And my sister was trying her best. And my mom lived right across the street from my sister when she got married, which wasn't healthy at all. But there was one instance where she decided to cut off contact with my mom because I had introduced that idea of just maybe you need to like just block her number and not talk to her. But my sister had gone over to my mom's house with her husband to drop off a bottle of wine. And just as a, like, you know, thinking about you kind of gift. And my mom didn't answer the door, as she usually didn't answer the door because she would be obviously at home, but she wouldn't answer the door to her own children most of the time. Even when I would come visit, I'd drive 45 minutes to come visit her and she wouldn't answer the door for no good reason. And so they left because she didn't answer the door, but they left the bottle of wine. And when they went home, my mom went into a narcissistic rage, texting her, telling her all these things, all these horrible things about how she doesn't have the same relationship with her that she used to before she started dating her husband, and that she needs to grow up, and, you know, just attacking her, even over my sister just leaving a bottle of wine. And like, here you go. And maybe that wasn't the smartest because we hadn't quite realized it, but my mom, for a very long time, especially throughout our teenage lives, had an alcoholic problem. She's an alcoholic. But it was a gift. And my mom just went into a rage and said a lot of hurtful things to my sister. And to the point where my mom had always kept memorabilia of our school and all this stuff, like in like a box. So at least we kind of felt like that was special to her. You know, pictures and stuff like that, and stuff we had drawn in school, and like stuff from throughout our school lives, and yearbooks and all this stuff she had kept. And she gathered all my sister's things and walked over to her house and dropped them on her doorstep and said she didn't need those anymore. And that was really hurtful to my sister. Mm-hmm. And it was like the same thing she had done to me, just in a different way. Like, you don't matter anymore at all. Like, you don't exist to me, you know, even though you could have been giving, and all my sister did was give her a gift, you know, that's all she did. She didn't like provoke it in any way. And that's how sick my mother is. She's just so sick. And, it's so hard to deal with because now her texting me, she's trying to like love bomb me because I'm keeping her at way more than an arm's length and I'm not talking to her, and she's trying to tell me that she loves me so much, and if I just want to talk, she'll just listen, and trying to make me doubt what she can do. You know, that I'm being unreasonable by not taking the opportunity to listen, like to talk, and her just listen and to resolve things. So I've tried that already. I've tried to talk to her. Sorry.
Sorry, did you put her on block?
I did, yeah. But my phone, I can still see the messages. She can text me through my phone for some reason. I discovered that I can still see the messages that she sends, but it's in a blocked folder, which isn't awesome because I'd rather just not see them. Yeah. But sometimes the temptation's too great to just look at them.
Yeah, of course.
So I read them, and I read that like the other day when that was the last text that she sent me, was just like, if you just want to talk, I'll just listen. Like, I love you so much, like heart emojis and all this stuff. And like, it caught me for a second, like it tugged on my heart for a second. And I kind of started to tear up because I wanted, like, the child in me just kind of came out for like 2 seconds. And I just wanted so much to believe her and to be like, you know, we can finally, like, at least I can let this all out to her, and maybe she'll finally get it, you know. And like, even if I were able to say all this to her, it doesn't mean that I'm going to forgive her. Like, that would just be the beginning of everything. But she's not, she says she is, but she's not willing and never has been willing to even step in that direction. And when I left, she never looked over her shoulder. she didn't care where I was. She didn't care where I went. She didn't care what was happening to me. A lot of bad stuff happened in my life after she kicked me out. I had to break back into the house in order to get my stuff when she wasn't there after she kicked me out because she locked the house. I had to break in. I didn't break any windows, but I just, took the screen off and crawled into her bedroom window in order to get some of my things. And I was 21 at this point. Even when me and my sister were old enough and paying for our own things, she would take away our phones and she wouldn't give them back. Even though they were our phones, we were paying for them. We were in our 20s. She would still take them away as discipline and she wouldn't give them back. So yeah,
So how are you doing now?
It's so hard. Now, I'm a lot better than I was. My viewpoint on myself, I've gone through so many stages of trying to come out of that very sick viewpoint on myself. I viewed myself, did such a number on my self-esteem. Mm-hmm. And, it was kind of like that took a backseat because all of this turmoil and all this drama and events with my mother was just the forefront of my life. So me not having good self-esteem, as much as it was always in my head and torturing me and me trying to deal with it internally, always took a backseat to that. So I never got a chance to just even take a step towards feeling I can have confidence in myself and I can, I don't have to be fearful of taking on, the world even, because it was growing up, the world wasn't mine. Mm-hmm. The world wasn't mine. It was everybody else's. Everybody was superior to me because of that. I wasn't allowed to be a part of the world. I wasn't, I didn't go to college. I didn't even have the hope or even the idea of hey, maybe I'm going to go to college and have friends and have these life experiences that some kids have, a lot of kids have. I was just no, that wasn't for me. That wasn't mine. I didn't go to prom. I didn't have a grad ceremony because my mom didn't care. Mm-hmm. She didn't care about my grad ceremony. So I just skipped it as much as I wanted to go. So now I feel like I've come a long way, trying my best to view myself in a whole new light and not seeing myself as that abused person. And the things that I saw in the mirror and that were manifesting themselves outwardly, the abuse was manifesting itself outwardly in me. So looking in the mirror, it was hard to look at myself. So it was just that was the light that I shed on myself, no matter what, it always kind of stuck with me as much as I tried to get rid of it. And I feel now I've managed to get rid of it, a large part of it, at least a large part of it.
So is your biggest struggle your own self-esteem right now?
I think so. I think at least that's one of my biggest struggles is my self-esteem. But a lot of things about my personality, I hadn't accessed. Mm-hmm. Because my mom would always say, you girls have very strong personalities. And she would say that that was the worst thing in the world. Because she wanted us to, turn back into our weak selves so that she could continue bullying us, bullying the weak version of ourselves. So we weren't allowed to even access our personalities and things that we might have, these attributes in our individual, personalities. We couldn't access and nourish and let grow. It was just you being, assertive in any way, in any good way, really was bad. Mm-hmm. Having a strong personality and to normal people, that would sound like a compliment. But growing up, we thought that was just the worst thing that she could say. One of the worst things she could say. Oh yeah,
because she wanted to make you meek. So she pointed out that you shouldn't be this way. So you just succumb to whatever she wanted you to do.
exactly. Like we were, she was, and by saying that, she was comparing us to our dad. Like our dad had a strong personality. And so it was like, you're like your father. And, and dad was like the worst person in our minds. So it was like, we don't want to be like dad. So like, well, whatever you want, Mom, like whatever you want kind of thing.
I didn't want to interrupt you earlier while you were telling your story, but there was one story that you told where it resonated a lot with me because I wrote down on my piece of paper. It was your Tupperware story, and because it reminded me of a story with my brother, and mine was pretty similar, but it was over milk. And I had taken the milk out of the fridge, and I went into a different room because I had a glass of milk and I had cookies with me, and I knew that I would want more than one glass of milk while having these cookies. But the glass is only so big, so I brought the carton of milk with me. And that turned into the milk is not in the proper place. So when you told your story about the Tupperware not being where it's supposed to be, for me, it was just this giant flashback of my life, dealing with someone over something so small and so insignificant. It had nothing to do with anything. It was just milk. And as you said, when you were talking, you said it was just Tupperware. It gave me, it was like a deja vu moment, and I was thrown back into my home, or my parents' home. And it started a fist fight. It started not just a fist fight, a brawl, where I was being intimidated, and I was being shoved, or I started getting poked at and shoved around and physically imposed upon, and I had no other choice at that point to try to assert myself back, knowing that in my case the person's temper was terrible. And if I was to push back, I had to go the whole way. I couldn't go halfway, because if I only went halfway, I was toast. And because with my brother, it was more if I didn't put him down and he wasn't like out, he was going to get back up and be worse than it was to begin with. So if for some reason that day I picked my battle to poke back, and it was a brawl like you would never have seen. Yeah. Stairs were like he was at the top of the stairs. I pushed him, and on his way down, as he was about to fall the whole entire way, like I saw it in slow motion, and he reached up with his hand, and he was always like unkempt and gross in my mind. He had like dirt under his nails. And like he somehow got a hold of my lip as he was falling, and he grasped my mouth and held on for dear life. If you could picture one guy standing straight up and another guy on let's say a 45-degree angle, holding on, clawed back up, and then beat the living crap out of me until it got broken up, and I got yelled at for starting the fight when my mom came in and broke it up. But sorry, I just had to go off on that tangent because it was so similar as to point out for some types of these people, it could be anything. It could just be the mood that they are in, and it sets them. Something sets them off, and then you become public enemy number one for some reason. So sorry, I interrupted.
So, no, don't be sorry. Like it's so crazy making. Like it's just like that's the behavior, you know, like and it can make you feel insane because you try to think logically about it and there is no logic to it.
No, because I looked. You didn't have a lot of friends. So when I would go with my friends, like my friends would validate, like that's crazy. Like they see the behavior. Your problem was that you didn't have anyone to validate. That's the very difficult to deal with. So right now, I guess before we wind down. How do you feel this whole entire conversation? Is this the first time you've verbalized everything?
Yeah. I mean, aside from me talking to my sister about stuff, this is really the first time that And I think it's so awesome that you've created kind of a platform for people to express their stories and what happened to them, because for so long I felt like I was looking towards my family and I resented them so much because we so desperately wanted at least one of them to be like, hey, like, what happened? You know, like, what happened? You know, but nobody did, you know, except for my sister, because we both went through the same thing. So this is the first time that I've had an opportunity to kind of actually verbalize my complete, you know, story. I have so many other stories, but that would take a whole day to go through. Unfortunately, that would take a whole day.
So going forward, how do you feel going forward from now, of how you'll do things or operate, or what you'll work on, or how are you going to go from here?
I feel good. I still have a lot to learn about NPD. Like, there's just so many things that have come. You know, I thought I learned everything, and then there was like a new term that totally resonated with what I remember and what I went through. So I feel like that learning helps me so much. Mm-hmm. But I just, hearing other people's stories too. And I listen to podcasts. I've listened to almost all your episodes of people's stories and all of that stuff.
And you go on Reddit, and I loved Raised by Narcissists on Reddit, that subreddit.
Yeah.
I love that subreddit.
That too. And I've been able to ask people questions on that, which has been totally helpful. But I feel like, I want to get to a point, because one of my biggest fears was, you know, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to do to them what my mom did to me. Mm-hmm. I'm so afraid that I'm going to be like my mother. And if I ever found out that I was even close to doing to my children, my own flesh and blood, what she did to me, then, you know, I just don't know how I would cope with that. So I know that I'm not like her because because of so many reasons, but it still has been a fear of mine. So I feel good in how much I'm learning, and therapy that I am pursuing, and how big my desire is to move on from this, mm-hmm. and for this not to be my life, and to be the best person that I can be, that if I have children, that I'm, you know, the best person for them, and that they have everything, you know, that they deserve and that they need in their lives to have a happy life, you know.
Well, so you're doing everything.
I feel hopeful.
Well, you're doing everything at a young age. Not a lot of people would be doing what you're doing right now to unpack everything. So you have a head start on, I'm going to say, 99.9% of society. So you should feel proud about that.
Well, that's good.
No, you really do. You know, a lot of people walk around in the fog and they're reactive and they never do anything or do anything about it. And their life just is the continuous pattern that repeats over and over and over again. And you're, you know, you're at a point where you want to break this pattern before it begins. The best thing that happened probably is having those 3 relationships that quickly in that amount of time that all didn't work for various reasons, for you to figure out right away that this is going to be a problem. Imagine if you went on and you didn't have a relationship right away. You didn't have one for 5 years, and then you didn't have another one for another 2, and then another 2 for after. It would probably take you like 9 years in that sense to figure out, oh, this is a pattern. But you got through that pretty fast. So you should be proud that you're already where you're at.
Well, thanks. Thanks for saying that.
So if you have any last words for everyone before we say our goodbyes, and I'll talk to you a little bit after.
I think the one thing I've noticed, and I hope other people realize this too, is when you grow up or you are in a relationship with somebody like a narcissist, and a lot of the time you're gaslighted. I've noticed something about myself that that has happened to me so much. I gaslight myself. And that was a part of my mentality and my thinking, was convincing myself that I was wrong, and that what I thought happened really didn't happen. or that, how I felt about things wasn't the right way to feel about things, even though it's very clear that it was wrong. I was right in feeling that way, and that what happened was wrong. So I hope people realize that within themselves, because that can be so damaging. It's one of the worst things that somebody can do to you, and it's the worst thing you can do to yourself. And it's only now am I pinpointing it. But I hope that other people have enough strength within themselves to realize that, and to know that, don't let anybody decide for you who you are. Don't let anybody make you think, that they know who you are, when it comes from a narcissist, when it comes from a negative person, because they're just from people like that, it's just so wrong. Whatever they think about you is wrong. So don't ever believe them, what they make you believe about yourself.
Well,
that's it. That's all the advice I have right now.
Well, thank you, Paige, for sharing your story with us today. And this has been Chad with Paige. Thanks for listening to this episode. And that was my interview with Paige. And as you can tell, a strong, brave woman who did everything on her own. And that is not an easy thing to do, to not be connected to really, besides her sister, but really to not be connected to any part of her family, and to not have that much help as far as therapy and those things go, and to come to terms with everything that has happened at such a young age. She's got a head start on a lot of people to deal with her problems and to move forward with her life, and she should be very proud of herself and for how far she's come. And we wish nothing but the best for Paige going forward. And also now, for everyone else out there, if you ever want to share your no-contact letters that you were never sent to your narcissist, your narcissistic parent, your relationships, send it into our show. You can go to the website, narcissistapocalypse.com. We have a recorder there. You can click on the recorder. It's on the side of the screen. You'll see the button. You click on it and you read your letter. It pops into our mailbox. And then one day we're going to have a show of all of the people that left messages. We already have one. And someone said that they're about to send one on their way. So we're looking forward to that because people like that episode. We heard that episode was very triggering for a lot of people. So we'll do our best to give a warning at least this time. And then besides that, keep on subscribing to our podcast. If you're new, give us some reviews. It helps us out a lot. We're getting more people every week. I think tomorrow I record with someone from, I think it's like a 12-hour time, not a 12-hour time difference, maybe 10-hour time difference. Maybe, I think it's in Malaysia. Something like that. We're worldwide. And the week after that, I think we're doing someone from, or a couple weeks, we're doing someone from in Germany. So, I mean, we really are getting the word out across the world, which is pretty mind-blowing to me that's what has gone on with this podcast. But now I've taken up enough of your time, and I really hope that everyone has a great week. This has been How to Survive the Narcissist Apocalypse podcast. I'm Chad the Impaler. Good night.
This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test. Please remain calm.